The Christmas lights were still blinking on the tree when Ryan's brother showed up at my door. It was 9 p.m. on December 22nd, and my husband had been dead for exactly 16 hours. I was still wearing the gray sweater I'd thrown on at the hospital, the one that smelled like antiseptic and bad cafeteria coffee. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the mechanical cheer of those lights. White, red, green, white, red, green. That Ryan had insisted on programming to blink in that exact sequence. "Symmetry matters, Isla," he used to say. "Chaos is just lazy thinking." When the doorbell rang, I knew it would be Derek. Ryan's younger brother, the one who looked at me during family dinners like I was a poorly solved equation. He stood on the porch in his black wool coat, snowflakes caught in his dark hair, holding a casserole dish that I knew he hadn't made himself. "Isla," he said, his voice dropping into that register men use when they think they're being gentle. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. He walked past me into the living room, set the casserole on the coffee table, right on top of a stack of unopened sympathy cards, and turned to face me. "I know this is awful timing," Derek began, "but we need to talk about logistics." Logistics. My husband had been gone less than a day, and his brother was already talking about logistics. "The house," he continued, glancing around like he was appraising it. "Ryan mentioned you two were still working through some financial details. I just want to make sure you're okay, that you have what you need." I stared at him. "What are you really asking, Derek?" He had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Ryan told me things were complicated, that you'd been struggling. He was worried about you managing everything on your own." Struggling. That word again. It was Ryan's favorite. Isla's struggling with her memory, Isla's struggling to keep up with the bills, Isla's struggling to stay organized. "I'm fine," I said flatly. Derek nodded, but his eyes said he didn't believe me. "Well, if you need help with anything, paperwork, accounts, decisions, I'm here. Ryan would have wanted that." After he left, I stood in the hallway and looked at the door at the end, the one that had been locked since we moved into this house 11 years ago, the door to Ryan's office. "It's just work stuff," he'd said, back then when we were still newlyweds and I still believed that love meant trusting without question. "Client files, research, boring financial documents. You'd hate it in there, babe. It's a disaster." But it wasn't a disaster. I knew that much, because Ryan didn't do disaster. Ryan did control, precision, order. Everything in our house had a place, a system, a rule. The spices were alphabetized, the towels were folded into perfect thirds. Even our Christmas decorations came out of labeled bins. Tree lights, living room, garland, staircase, ornaments, sentimental. The office was the only room I'd never seen inside, the only space that didn't belong to me, even though my name was on the mortgage. I walked toward it now, my socks silent on the hardwood floor. The door was plain white, with a brushed nickel handle and a deadbolt above it. I tried the handle. Locked, as always. I pressed my palm against the wood and closed my eyes. "What are you hiding, Ryan?" The funeral was on Christmas Eve. It felt obscene, burying someone on Christmas Eve, but Ryan's mother had insisted. He loved Christmas, she'd said, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief embroidered with tiny snowflakes. It's what he would have wanted. Ryan had loved Christmas the way a general loves a battlefield, strategically. He loved the planning, the execution, the satisfaction of a perfectly orchestrated holiday. But joy, spontaneity, the messy, beautiful chaos of a real Christmas morning, I don't think he ever felt that.
I stood beside the casket in a black dress I'd ordered online 2 days earlier, shaking hands and accepting condolences from people I barely knew. Ryan's colleagues, his clients, his college friends who I'd met maybe twice. He was brilliant, they said. He was so organized. He had everything figured out.
My best friend, Tessa, showed up near the end. She lived 3 hours away now, and we hadn't seen each other in almost 2 years. Ryan had never liked her. "She's too loud," he'd said once, after she'd visited for a weekend. "Too opinionated. She fills her head with ideas that aren't helpful, Isla." What he meant was, she makes you think for yourself. Tessa grabbed my hand during the reception and pulled me into the church bathroom. "Are you okay?" she asked, studying my face. "I don't know," I said honestly. "What can I do?" I hesitated. Then I said, "He had a locked office. I've never been inside." Tessa's eyes narrowed. 11 years, and you've never been in his office? He said it was work stuff, private. Isla, she gripped my shoulders. That's not normal. I know. Are you going to open it? I looked at myself in the mirror. I was 33 years old. I had a master's degree in graphic design. I owned half a house, and I had spent 11 years tiptoeing around a locked door like a guest in my own life. "Yes," I said. "I'm going to open it." I called a locksmith the next morning, Christmas Day. It took me 3 tries to find one who'd come out on a holiday, and even then, he charged me double. I didn't care. I stood in the hallway in my pajamas and a cardigan, watching as he drilled through the deadbolt. "You lose your key?" he asked. Something like that. When the lock finally gave way with a soft click, the locksmith packed up his tools and left. I paid him in cash from the emergency envelope Ryan kept in the kitchen drawer, another one of his systems, and closed the front door behind him. Then I turned and faced the office. The handle turned easily now. The door swung open. The smell hit me first. Not decay or must, but something sterile. Lemony cleaning solution and printer ink. The room was immaculate. A large desk sat in the center, its surface empty except for a closed laptop and a single pen placed at a perfect 90-degree angle to the edge. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with identical black binders, each one labeled with a white sticker and typed text. I stepped inside. The binders were organized by year in category. I scanned the labels, my stomach tightening with each one I read. Isla. Financial Records 2018. Isla. Health Logs 2019. Isla. Correspondence 2020. Isla. Behavioral Observations 2021. I pulled one down at random. Behavioral Observations 2021. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were pages and pages of notes, handwritten, dated, detailed. March 4th, 2021. Isla forgot to pick up my dry cleaning, claimed she lost track of time. Possible early sign of disorganization. Monitor. March 19th, 2021. Isla became emotional during discussion about Easter plans. Overreaction suggests hormonal imbalance or stress. Encouraged her to rest. April 2nd, 2021. Isla questioned monthly budget allocation. Became defensive when I explained the system. Exhibits distrust of my financial management. Consider limiting her access to accounts. I dropped the binder. It hit the floor with a slap that echoed in the silent room. This wasn't a husband keeping notes. This was surveillance. I grabbed another binder. Health Logs 2019. Inside were printed copies of my medical records, appointments I'd gone to, prescriptions I'd been given. But there were also notes in Ryan's handwriting, annotations in the margins.
Isla reports trouble sleeping, prescribed Ambien. Dosage may need adjustment if anxiety increases. Isla mentioned feeling overwhelmed at work, possible depressive episode, monitoring mood. He'd been tracking me, diagnosing me, documenting every moment I wasn't perfect, every time I showed a normal human emotion. I moved to the desk. The drawers were locked, but I found a letter opener in a cup of pens and pried the top one open. Inside was a manila folder labeled Contingency Plan. I opened it. The first document was a draft email, never sent, addressed to my boss at the design firm where I worked.
Dear Mr. Patterson, I'm writing to express concern about my wife, Isla's, recent performance. She's been experiencing some personal difficulties, memory issues, emotional instability, and I worry she may not be managing her workload effectively. I wanted to make you aware in case it becomes necessary to adjust her responsibilities. Best regards, Ryan Holloway. He was going to sabotage my career. The second document was worse. It was a letter to a psychiatrist I'd never heard of, dated 6 months ago. Dr. Brennan, thank you for agreeing to evaluate my wife. As I mentioned over the phone, Isla has been exhibiting concerning behaviors, memory lapses, mood swings, difficulty managing household tasks. I believe she may be experiencing early onset cognitive decline or a depressive disorder that requires professional intervention. I'm hopeful your assessment will provide clarity and allow us to pursue appropriate treatment, potentially including a care plan that ensures her safety and well-being. I've attached documentation of her behaviors over the past 3 years for your review. Regards, Ryan Holloway. My vision blurred. I read it again. He was trying to have me declared incompetent. I sank into his desk chair, the leather cold against my legs. The room spun slightly, the bookcases tilting, the labels blurring together. This wasn't love. This wasn't protection. This was a plan to erase me. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the winter light outside to shift from morning gray to afternoon gold. Long enough for my shock to burn into something harder, sharper. Anger. I stood up and started pulling binders off the shelves, one after another, stacking them on the desk. I found correspondence files filled with printed emails, messages I'd sent to Tessa, to my sister, to old college friends. He'd been accessing my accounts, reading my private conversations. In one email to Tessa from 2020, I'd written, "Sometimes I feel like I'm disappearing, like Ryan's version of me is replacing the real me." Ryan had highlighted that sentence in yellow and written in the margin, "Paranoia? Discuss with Dr. Brennan." I found financial records next. Our joint bank account, which I barely ever checked because Ryan handled the money. Except now, looking at the statements, I saw something I'd never noticed before. There was a second account, one I didn't have access to, and every month, Ryan had been transferring money from our joint account into it. Small amounts at first, $200, $300, but growing over the years. The most recent transfer was $2,000. He'd been siphoning off our money. No, my money. I'd been working full-time the entire marriage. Half of every paycheck I earned had been going into an account I couldn't touch. I kept digging. Beneath the financial files, I found a locked metal box. I turned the office upside down looking for a key, finally finding it taped under the desk drawer. Inside the box was a legal document, Power of Attorney, Isla Marie Holloway. It was unsigned, undated, but complete. a legal form that would have given Ryan control over every aspect of my life if I'd been declared incompetent. And beneath that, another document. Last Will and Testament, Ryan Holloway. I read it. Every word. He'd left everything, the house, the savings, the investments, in a trust controlled by his brother, Derek Holloway. I would be allowed to live in the house, but I wouldn't own it. I'd receive a monthly allowance, but I wouldn't control the money. Every major decision about my life would require Derek's approval. In the event that Isla is unable to manage her own affairs due to mental or emotional instability, the will read, Derek Holloway shall serve as her legal guardian and fiduciary. I was 33 years old, and my husband had written a will that turned me into a child. I sat on the floor of his office, surrounded by binders and documents and the wreckage of 11 years, and I didn't cry. I laughed. It was a bitter, broken sound, but it was real. Because for the first time in years, I saw it clearly. Ryan hadn't loved me. He'd been building a cage, and he'd almost finished it before his heart gave out.
I called Tessa that night. "I need a lawyer," I said when she picked up. "What happened?" I opened the office. Silence. Then, "How bad?" He was documenting everything, trying to have me declared incompetent. The will leaves everything to Derek in a trust. I'd have no control over my own life, Tessa. Jesus Christ. I heard rustling on her end like she was grabbing paper and a pen. Okay, I know someone. A family law attorney who specializes in financial abuse cases. Her name is Monica Reyes. She's fierce. I'm texting you her number right now. Thank you. Isla? Yeah? You're not crazy. You know that, right? What he did, that's abuse. That's gaslighting. You're not the problem. I closed my eyes. I'm starting to believe that. The next morning, I was sitting in Monica Reyes's office. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp black eyes and silver streaks in her dark hair. Her office was cluttered in a way that felt honest, lived in. Stacks of case files, a half-empty coffee mug, a photo of 2 kids on her desk. I handed her the folder I'd compiled, copies of the binders, the will, the contingency plan, the financial records. She read in silence for 20 minutes. When she finally looked up, her expression was hard. "Mrs. Holloway, what your husband did is called coercive control. It's psychological abuse, and it's illegal in many contexts. Can we stop the will? We can challenge it, especially with this." She tapped the contingency plan. "This shows intent to manipulate your legal standing. He was creating a false narrative of incompetence to justify seizing control of your assets and autonomy. That's undue influence, and it's grounds to contest. Derek already has access to the accounts. Ryan named him executor. Then we move fast." Monica leaned forward. "I'm going to file an emergency petition to freeze the estate and challenge the trust. We'll request a full audit of all financial accounts and subpoena any medical professionals Ryan contacted about you. If we can prove he was manufacturing evidence of incompetence, we can get the will thrown out. How long will this take?" "Months, maybe a year." She paused. "But Isla, you need to be prepared. This is going to get ugly. Derek will fight back. He'll use Ryan's documentation against you. They'll try to paint you as unstable, forgetful, incapable." I thought about the binders, the years of notes, the meticulous records of every tiny mistake, every normal emotion reframed as a symptom. Let them try. Monica smiled. It wasn't warm. It was the smile of a woman who'd seen this before and knew how to win. "Good," she said. "Then let's burn it all down." Derek showed up 3 days later with a briefcase and a fake smile. I opened the door in jeans and an old sweater, my hair in a messy bun. I hadn't been sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those binders. Every label, every note,
every little moment of my life dissected and pathologized. Isla? Derek stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. I need to discuss the estate. I have a lawyer, I said. He stopped, turned. I'm sorry? I said I have a lawyer, Monica Reyes. She's already filed a petition to challenge the will. Derek's jaw tightened. He set his briefcase down on the entry table, the one I'd refinished myself 2 years ago, the one Ryan said looked amateurish, and faced me fully. Isla, I know you're grieving, he said, his voice taking on that condescending edge I was starting to recognize in all the men in Ryan's orbit. But contesting the will is a mistake. Ryan put that trust in place to protect you. From what? From making decisions you're not equipped to make. I laughed. It was a sharp, hollow sound. Not equipped. That's interesting phrasing, Derek. Did Ryan tell you I wasn't equipped? Did he show you his files? He blinked. What files? The ones in his office. The behavioral logs, the health records, the contingency plan where he was going to have me declared incompetent. His face paled slightly, but he recovered quickly. Ryan was concerned about you. He confided in me. You've been struggling, Isla.
The memory issues, the mood swings. I don't have memory issues, I interrupted. I have a husband who told me I did. So many times I started to believe him. That's called gaslighting, Derek. Look it up. You're being emotional. I'm being accurate. I stepped closer. And if you try to enforce that trust, my lawyer will make sure every judge in this county sees exactly what kind of man your brother was. Derek's expression hardened. The fake warmth evaporated completely. You'll regret this. I already regret 11 years, I said. What's a little more? He grabbed his briefcase and left without another word. I locked the door behind him and slid down to the floor, my back against the wood, my hands shaking. Tessa called an hour later. How are you holding up? She asked. Derek just left. He threatened me. Of course he did. These men always do. I heard rustling, like she was moving to a quieter room. Listen, I'm coming to stay with you for a few days. I already talked to my boss. I'm leaving tomorrow morning. Tessa, you don't have to. Yes, I do. You shouldn't be alone right now. Plus, I want to see this office for myself. She arrived the next afternoon with a suitcase, a box of wine, and a fury I'd forgotten she was capable of. I showed her the office. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, just staring at the bookshelves full of binders, the desk with its locked drawers, the sterile precision of it all. Then she walked to the nearest shelf, pulled down a binder, and opened it. She read in silence. I watched her face change. Shock, then disgust, then pure rage. He wrote that you exhibited signs of dependency when you asked him to help you change a tire? Tessa looked up at me, incredulous. Isla, that's not dependency. That's called having a flat tire. I know. She kept reading. He tracked your menstrual cycle. He has a chart. A fucking chart. I know. Tessa slammed the binder shut and turned to me. How did we not see this? He was careful, I said quietly. He never yelled, never hit me. He just rewrote reality, one note at a time. He pulled me into a hug, fierce and tight. I'm so sorry. I should have pushed harder. It's not your fault, I said into her shoulder. He made sure I was isolated. He made sure no one would believe me if I said anything. We spent the rest of the evening going through the files together. Tessa took photos of the most damning pages with her phone. We organized them by category: financial abuse, emotional manipulation, attempted coercion. This is evidence, Tessa said, holding up a log from 2019 where Ryan had written, Isla challenged my decision to cancel our anniversary trip, became tearful and irrational, increased evening medication to manage emotional volatility.
I wasn't irrational, I said, remembering that day with sudden clarity. I'd been looking forward to that trip for months. He canceled it without telling me because a client meeting came up. I cried because I was disappointed. That's normal. Of course it's normal, Tessa said. But he turned it into a symptom. He turned your humanity into a diagnosis. That night, we ordered Chinese food and sat on the living room floor with the files spread out around us like evidence at a crime scene. The Christmas tree was still up, its lights blinking in that same rhythmic pattern Ryan had programmed. White, red, green. White, red, green. Are you going to take the tree down? Tessa asked, nodding toward it. I looked at the tree. Ryan had insisted on a real one every year, a 7-foot Douglas fir that he'd arrange and decorate himself according to a color-coded system. I wasn't allowed to help. He'd say, "Too much chaos. You'll throw off the balance." I stood up, walked to the tree, and started pulling ornaments off. One by one. I didn't carefully wrap them in tissue paper like Ryan would have wanted. I just took them down and tossed them into boxes. Tessa joined me. We worked in silence, dismantling Ryan's perfect tree. When it was bare, I looked at it. Just a tree, brown and brittle, and smelling faintly of pine.
I want to plant it, I said suddenly. What? In the backyard. I want to plant it. Let it grow or die or whatever it's going to do. But I don't want it in here anymore, preserved and controlled. Tessa smiled. Let's do it. We dragged the tree through the kitchen, out the back door, and into the snowy yard. We didn't have a shovel, so we used our hands, digging a hole in the frozen ground until our fingers were numb and red. We planted the tree at midnight. It stood crooked in the snow, its branches reaching up toward the dark sky like arms. "Merry Christmas, Isla," Tessa said. I started to cry. Not sad tears, something else. Relief, maybe. Or release? "Merry Christmas," I whispered back. The court hearing was scheduled for mid-January. Monica prepared me like a coach training for a fight. She had me write down every instance I could remember of Ryan controlling, manipulating, or gaslighting me. Every time he told me I was forgetful when I wasn't. Every time he prescribed me medication I didn't need. Every time he made me doubt my own reality. The list was 7 pages long. "This is good," Monica said, reviewing it in her office. "But Isla, you need to be ready for what Derek's lawyer is going to do. They're going to use Ryan's documentation against you. They're going to argue that he was a concerned husband trying to help his struggling wife. I wasn't struggling. I know. But they're going to make it look like you were. You need to stay calm, stay clear, and stick to the facts." The day of the hearing, I wore a navy dress and heels. I straightened my hair. I put on makeup. I looked like the competent, stable woman I'd always been. The woman Ryan had spent 11 years trying to convince everyone I wasn't. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Derek sat at the defendant's table with his lawyer, a man in his 50s with silver hair and an expensive suit. He looked at me like a child throwing a tantrum. The judge was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense. That felt like a good sign. Monica stood and presented our case. She laid out the evidence methodically. The behavioral logs, the intercepted correspondence, the fake diagnosis, and the contingency plan. "Your Honor," Monica said, "the deceased created a systematic pattern of coercive control designed to undermine his wife's autonomy and credibility. The will in question is an extension of that abuse. It seeks to strip Mrs. Holloway of her legal rights based on a manufactured narrative of incompetence." Derek's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, with respect, Mr. Holloway was a devoted husband who kept detailed records because he was genuinely concerned about his wife's well-being. Mrs. Holloway has a history of emotional volatility." "I'd like to see evidence of that history," the judge interrupted. Derek's lawyer hesitated. "The deceased's notes? Notes written by a man with a vested interest in controlling his wife's assets." The judge looked at me. "Mrs. Holloway, have you ever been diagnosed with a mental illness by an independent medical professional?" I stood. "No, Your Honor."
Have you ever been hospitalized for psychiatric reasons? No, Your Honor. Have you ever been deemed incompetent by a court? No, Your Honor. The judge looked back at Derek's lawyer. Then on what grounds are you asking me to enforce a trust that treats her as such? Derek's lawyer fumbled through his papers. Mr. Holloway was a medical professional. His observations are hearsay, the judge said flatly, and potentially coercive. Monica stepped forward. Your Honor, we'd also like to submit evidence of financial abuse. Mr. Holloway transferred over $40,000 from the couple's joint account into a private account that Mrs. Holloway didn't know existed. That money was earned during the marriage and legally belongs to both parties. The judge reviewed the financial records Monica handed her. Her expression darkened. Mr. Holloway was managing the household finances, Derek's lawyer said quickly. That's not unusual in a marriage. Managing is one thing, hiding is another. The hearing lasted 3 hours. By the end, I felt wrung out, exhausted, but strangely light.
The judge took a recess to review the evidence. When she came back, her decision was swift. I'm dissolving the trust, she said. The will is set aside. Mrs. Holloway is granted full control of the marital estate, including all accounts, properties, and assets. Mr. Derek Holloway is removed as executor. I felt Tessa's hand squeeze mine. Furthermore, the judge continued, I'm ordering a full audit of all financial transactions conducted by the deceased in the 5 years prior to his death. If evidence of financial abuse is found, Mrs. Holloway may be entitled to additional compensation. Derek stood abruptly. His face was red. This is absurd. My brother. Your brother, the judge said, her voice cold, engaged in a pattern of coercive control that bordered on elder abuse, despite his wife's age. This court does not look kindly on attempts to strip competent adults of their autonomy. We're adjourned. The gavel came down. I sat there, stunned. Monica leaned over. You did it. We did it, I said. 3 months later, spring arrived. The tree we'd planted in the backyard didn't survive. It was brown and brittle, its needles scattered across the snow-turned mud. But something else had started growing in its place. Crocuses, purple and yellow, pushing up through the cold ground. I stood at the kitchen window with a cup of coffee, watching them bloom. Tessa had gone back home, but she called every week. My sister had started visiting more. I'd even reached out to a few old friends I'd lost touch with over the years, people Ryan had slowly edged out of my life. I'd turned his office into a studio. I ripped out the bookshelves, painted the walls a soft sage green, and set up my drafting table by the window. I was freelancing now, taking on design projects I actually cared about instead of the corporate work Ryan had always pushed me toward. You're too creative for your own good, he used to say. You need structure. No, I needed freedom. The house felt different now, lighter. I'd removed the heavy curtains Ryan insisted on and replaced them with sheer whites that let the sun pour in. I'd rearranged the furniture. I planted herbs in the kitchen windowsill. I was rewriting the space, just like I was rewriting myself. Last week, I'd started a journal, not a log of symptoms or behaviors, but a record of joy. Small things, the way morning light hits the floor, the taste of coffee made exactly how I like it, or the satisfaction of finishing a design I'm proud of. I called it Reclaiming the Narrative. On the first page, I wrote, I am not the woman he said I was. I am not fragile, forgetful, or incompetent. I am strong, I am capable, I am free. There were still hard days when I caught myself second-guessing a decision, wondering if I really was remembering something correctly, feeling that old doubt creep back in. But then I'd look at the files Monica helped me organize, the legal documents that proved Ryan's abuse wasn't in my head. I'd call Tessa or my sister or one of my rekindled friendships, and I'd remember, I am not alone. Yesterday, I got an email from a woman named Claire. She'd found my blog, a small thing I'd started about surviving coercive control, and she wanted advice.
"My husband tracks everything I do," she wrote. "He says it's because he loves me, but it doesn't feel like love. It feels like drowning." I wrote back immediately. "It's not love," I told her. "Love doesn't monitor. Love doesn't diminish. Love doesn't require you to disappear. You're not crazy. You're not overreacting. Trust what you feel. And when you're ready, open the locked door. See what he's been hiding, because I promise you, it's not what he said it was." I hit send and stared at the screen for a long time. Then I opened a new document and started writing. Not for Claire, but for anyone who needed to hear it.
If you are listening this and something feels familiar, if you have a voice in your life that tells you you're too emotional, too forgetful, too much, listen to me. You are not the problem. The person who benefits from your doubt is the problem. Check the accounts they say you wouldn't understand. Read the emails they tell you are boring. Ask the questions they tell you not to ask. Because they will call you paranoid. They will call you dramatic. They will call you difficult. But that's just the sound of them losing control. Come back to yourself. The door is unlocked. You just have to turn the handle. I saved the document and titled it, "The Room He Kept Locked." Then I posted it. Within an hour, it had 50 shares. By that evening, 500. By the end of the week, women were commenting with their own stories. Some were still trapped. Some had just escaped. Some were standing in front of their own locked doors, trying to find the courage to turn the handle. I read every comment. I responded to as many as I could. And slowly, I realized something. Ryan had tried to make me small. He'd tried to erase me, control me, reduce me to a set of symptoms in a binder. But he'd failed, because I was still here, and I was louder than I'd ever been. I walked into my studio and looked at the empty wall where his bookshelves used to be. I picked up a paintbrush and dipped it in yellow. Bright, bold, unapologetic yellow. And I started painting. Not a plan, not a system. Just color. Just life. Just me. The woman I'd always been. Finally coming back home.